Okay, I'm back for a short segment about, once again, that seductive septuagenarian Sanders, Bernie Sanders, whose arguments are falling on too many receptive ears that don't get backed up by the consequences, okay? The nice sounding, people should not pay so much for drugs. It does sound nice, okay? In Bernie's terms, too many people are paying 10 times as much as they need to. It's unfair. But first off, the fair word, the F word, is in the eye of a beholder. There is no one definition of fair. Now, paying 10 times more than you need to certainly sounds inefficient. And here is our way of reducing the prices of drugs. It is not through the command and control that Bernie and Elizabeth Warren want. It's through the free market, because that's where unimpeded capitalism, that drug providers, to get a profit at all, need to come to a price that people willingly pay. Now, the reason prices are so high right now is that people don't have a choice. There are too many intermediaries, big insurance companies, healthcare conglomerates. When they are not in the picture, when the consumer really has a choice among all the drugs out there, and the manufacturers have to compete with one another for all but the drugs that are on patent, prices come down. It is the fairest system in the world, and here's how we know this. In industries where there's very little restriction, prices are pretty low. You don't pay very much for clothing in America. You don't pay very much for computing in America. Those are industries that have never faced huge regulation, thank goodness. And we have our choices. We have computers that get better and better year after year, clothing that changes styles and is either warmer or colder or tighter or more appealing. It's a beautiful thing that we should have in our healthcare system. Now, Bernie would also like to say he doesn't want seniors to spend more than $200 a year on drugs. That is a misappropriation colossally. Seniors are the wealthiest cohort of America. The average 85-year-old is worth 35 times the wealth of the average 35-year-old. It's a ridiculous comparison. If you want to go to poor seniors and help them out, different story. But please do that. Why does he go with only seniors? Because there's a huge cohort. Because the AARP en masse, everyone 55 and older, can then get riled up by it. But Bernie knows that being more selective is more fair, to use his word. And a welfare system that looks to fairness and not populism is much better. What Bernie does is seductive. So were many leaders that were horrible for their nations. Stalin was seductive, and he ended up murdering 40 million Russians. Back to 1789, the French revolutionaries were seductive, and they killed, via the guillotine, many good citizens. More recently was Mao, 60 million Chinese dead as a result of him. And even more current, Chavez in Venezuela. A country that is now filled with people eating dogs because of a seductive socialism that did not work. Command and control is not America. It is not fair, to use anyone's terminology, and it diminishes the individual and emboldens government. There are very few good governments. They tend to be small municipalities. Once you get big, you get abusive. The federal government has gotten very big. And Bernie himself will point to abuses by the federal government, yet he wants to enlarge its power. That's the perversity. I share the goals, the end goals with Bernie on almost every single ground. And the way you get there is less government, not more. I'll conclude with something that I didn't hear in the Chris Ryan interview. I didn't hear a single mention of billionaires. Good. But we know it's in the background. Bernie rails against them. Look, no billionaire has mistreated him, or to my knowledge, anybody else in America. If anything, billionaires are the ones who employ people, who give a good amount of philanthropy that poor people can't give. So whether it's out of political correctness or out of their genuine desire to help mankind, the billionaire has the ability to help mankind a lot better. And nobody has shown me that billionaires are hurting other people. Now, there is a concern, I share it in a big way, of the billionaires having political power. That is not an indictment of capitalism, though. That is an indictment of a government system that does deserve to be changed. Thankfully, we still have one vote, and people who in legislatures are bribed by very rich people can and should be voted out. But that takes more adherence by the public, we the people, to shows like Chris Ryan's, devoting 3 hours a day to all civics. Wonderful. When we are more engaged, we won't get abusive politicians who may or may not be at the behest of the very wealthy. They're at the behest of us, we the people. I'm Mark Stewart. Thanks for listening.